Hi, good morning. My name is Deanna Jackson, and to preface this, I'm losing my voice a little bit, so if I sound raspy, I'm very sorry. Allergies are a killer. I'm going to go over my unit plan organizer, which I've created with the NUO unit plan organizer template from Niagara University, and this is going to be on my 3 mini lessons, my mini unit. So the topic or title for the unit is La Familia, exploring family in Italian language and culture. The subject area is obviously Italian. The grades would be grade 10. So I chose grade 10, level 1, LWIBD, so the academic strand. The estimated number of lessons, I put 6 to 9, depending on how fast we get through the lesson. And the total number of days that I estimate for this lesson would be about 10. The big ideas and or fundamental uh, concepts that we're going to be going through this unit would be the ability to communicate in Italian using vocabulary and grammar related to family life, to introduce and describe family members using proper sentence structure, to identify similarities and differences between Italian and Canadian family dynamics, build foundational skills in reading, writing, speaking, and listening in Italian, and to understand how culture shapes language and identity in Italian language speaking countries. So, the enduring understandings that I have for this unit would be language is a tool for communication, connection, and cultural expression. And then understanding family structures help us to reflect on our own values and relationships. And learning another language helps us to appreciate different cultures and global perspectives. And the last one being expressing personal and cultural identity through language builds intercultural understanding. So when we look at the learning skills and work habits and transferable skills that I have here, I tried to have something for everything. So for responsibilities, students will be expected to complete individual and group tasks on time with care. For their organization, I request that students must organize resources, for example, their vocabulary sheets, their planners, and follow classroom routines. Their independent work, written tasks, and vocabulary review require focus, independent engagement. For their collaboration, activities require students to work in pairs or small groups to practice oral communication and provide clear feedback. In the initiative section, students are encouraged to make personal connections, take risks in using new vocabulary, and share reflections. There's self-regulation. Students self-assess their work and track their progress through a checklist and success criteria that I provided for each lesson. And then the transferable skills, so communication, creativity, and critical thinking through oral presentations, written tasks, and cultural comparisons. When we move down to the overall curriculum expectations, the ones that I've selected, so I've selected A, B, C, and D. So for all of them, the listening, the speaking, the reading, and the writing. So I've done A1, so listening to understand. This is very basic. So listening to understand, I thought would be very important. Then we go on to speaking, which is B1, speaking to communicate. We have C1, which is reading comprehension, and D1, the purpose, audience, and form. So for the specific expectations, I have a 1.2, so demonstrating an understanding. So demonstrate an understanding of the purpose and meaning of oral text in the target language that contain information about matters of personal interest and familiar topics with contextual or visual support, which I think is very important in the beginning. So if they're able to follow oral directions, define specific classroom objects, identify the main message of, and new vocabulary in a dialogue, song, or an audio webcast, summarize key information in a brief oral report about technology use in schools, writing words, pictures, or actions, using words, pictures, or actions, identify vocabulary related to time, days, months, numbers in a recorded message about train schedules, and classify in using a graphic organizer. Determine the meaning of new words in a dramatization of an authentic conversation in a restaurant, identifying the cost of an item for sale at a marketplace or store. I thought this was very important because this is all stuff that's fundamental. And being a beginner course, this is what they would need. This is the basic stuff that they would need for themselves if they were to go to Italy. And then for B2, under the speaking section, so producing oral communication, so produce brief, rephrased messages in a target language to communicate information about matters of personal interest or familiar topics with contextual, auditory, and visual support. So if they're able to introduce themselves, a family member, and or their pets, so describe how to perform an action or find an object. Deliver a presentation on daily routines, a hobby, sport, celebrity, film, or type of music using visual aids, and a script. So if they can recount a sequence of events from a fictional or news story, deliver an oral report on an environmental issue, such as the impact of climate change, or compose and deliver a narration of a slideshow, for a slideshow, report the findings of a survey of peers' musical preferences, explain the cost and purpose of each item in a budget that they have created for a minor event such as a birthday party. This again, very, very important. And moving on, I found that C1.4 was very good under C1 for reading. So developing vocabulary. So use a range of vocabulary acquisition strategies before, during, and after reading to determine or confirm the meaning of new, unfamiliar, or recently learned words. So seeing everything in context is really important. So for example, using knowledge of roots, prefixes, and suffixes to infer the meaning of unfamiliar words, identify while reading, and keep a list for future references. Consult a target language English dictionary while reading to confirm or revise their interpretation of unfamiliar words, and create a list of personally relevant words from a variety of reading sources to refer to as like a memory aid, which is really important. So they can compile a list of themes and concepts after reading to consolidate their vocabulary acquisition, while they can also compile a list of names and associated symbols of currencies used in the target language communities around the world. And for the very last specific expectation that I have is D1.1. So under writing for D1, I have identifying purpose and audience, determine with support from the teacher their purpose for writing and the audience for text in the target language they plan to create. For example, to provide personal information on an application for a summer job or a registration form for an extracurricular activity, to send greetings to a friend, family member, or teacher in a postcard, to describe personal preferences and interests to a pen pal by letter, to record daily activities in a personal diary for their own interest, to prepare for a class discussion about a fictional character by creating a word web, to compose an e-letter inviting friends or relatives to a celebration, to create a simple budget for a trip to tourist attractions in a target language community, which is something that I have done for this class in the past. So the learning goals for the unit, so what we will do, so we are learning to talk about our families in Italian. We are learning to describe people using Italian adjectives. We are learning to understand and use new Italian words by listening, reading, and speaking. We are learning to write simple sentences and short texts about people and daily life. We are learning about how families in Italy are similar to and different from families in Canada. And then for the success criteria for the unit, so how I will show it, so how it will be done, I will introduce my family members and describe them in Italian. I will use vocabulary and adjectives correctly in sentences. I can understand key words and main ideas when listening to or reading about family. I can write a paragraph about my family for a specific audience or purpose, and I can recognize and explain some cultural similarities and differences between Italian and Canadian families. So I wanted to make sure that we didn't put in any of this so far that they would be tested on their pronunciation of Italian words, just because it's the very beginner level. I do not expect any of the students to be able to pronounce the Italian words as if they were a native, and I'm not going to put pressure on them to do so, as this is a unit that would be done earlier in the year, probably one of the beginning units, probably after time and such. So for the lesson plan order, so the first lesson plan that I have would be lesson 1, Chi c'è nella tua famiglia, so introducing family members. So the overall expectations would be A1 and B1. The specific expectations that I have would be A1.2 and B1.2. So before, for the minds on, students participate in a think, pair, share activity responding to a question: who is in your family? Using visuals, they brainstorm in English and try to guess Italian words based off the cognates and prior knowledge. This helps activate schema and prepare for new vocabulary. So if we're teaching this in a school where students also have a foundation of French, they might be able to guess the Italian words, and in this way we would also be able to create similarities between Italian, French, and English, which I found personally helpful when I was learning and when I was a student. So for the during the action, the teacher myself would introduce key family vocabulary, madre, padre, sorella, fratello, etc., using a family tree and flashcards if we need to, or I can put it on the board. Students will listen to a short audio dialogue between two people talking about their families in pairs. Students will rehearse and perform a simple Q&A about their own families using sentence stems like chi è tuo fratello? Lui è mio fratello. Si chiama Marco. So the after the consolidation, so students complete an exit slip identifying 3 new family-related words they learned and use them in a short oral sentence or drawing if they prefer. Teacher collects slips to assess understanding and pronunciation. So again, I have that on there, but that's not one of the main things. So pronunciation, that's only if they are doing the short oral sentence, and that's if they feel comfortable, if they want to take risks. So the second lesson, descriviamo la nostra famiglia, so describing family members. So the overall expectations that I have for this one are C1 and B1 to be specific, and the specific expectations I have are B1.2 and C1.4. So before the mind's on, students will view photos of families, including Italian celebrity families or fictional ones, and guess how they might describe them using simple adjectives like alto, simpatica, sportivo. This primes them for adjective vocabulary and agreement rules. So during the action, the teacher provides a mini lesson on adjective noun agreement. So this is done before everything. And students read a short, simplified paragraph describing a family. So For example, la mia famiglia è grande. Mio padre è alto e simpatico. And then in pairs, they highlight new vocabulary, either by underlining it or using a highlighter, and they'll discuss traits of their own family members, describing them. And students complete a short oral activity, because I wanted to have them practice as much as possible with their speaking, describing two people in their family using 2 to 3 adjectives that I will give them a vocabulary sheet from the mini unit prior to doing this lesson. And then after the consolidation, so students fill out a short graphic organizer with family member names, adjectives, and a visual sketch. They then present one family member orally to a small group using their organizers as support. And then for the third and final lesson, I have Famiglie Italiane e Famiglie Canadesi. So comparing cultures through writing. So the overall expectations are C1 and D1, and the specific expectations are C1.4 and D1.1. So before the mind's on, as a class, students watch a short slideshow or a teacher-led presentation in Italian or in English, depending on their comfort level, on Italian versus Canadian family life. So the typical household size, the traditions, the family meals. One thing that I could bring up is the different times that a family would eat, and then we could also go over times, and they would be able to use their vocabulary from the time unit in here. The students would then make predictions about what might be similar or might be different. The action, so during the lesson, students read a short level appropriate article or infograph on Italian family structure. The teacher guides a vocabulary review using cognates and context, which is very important. Everything needs to be in context. The students brainstorm in a Venn diagram comparing their own family experience with the Italian model. Then for after the consolidation, so students will write a short paragraph comparing their family to a typical Italian family, considering cultural differences nella mia famiglia in Italy. They submit the writing as a formative assessment and may present key points out loud if time allows. So if in the class I were to have students from Italy, rather than comparing their family to an Italian family, they would do the vice versa. So they would try and make inferences about what a Canadian family is like. Or they may, if they've been here for a while, they may compare themselves, their Italian family, to Italians in Italy, and see how they've changed and how they're the same. So the accommodations that I will have, so the accommodations for the lesson. So I will provide vocabulary sheets with visual cues, I think are very important. Allow the use of bilingual dictionaries or glossaries, especially because we're using a lot of grammar, and this is very grammar heavy. Extra time for reading and writing tests. This is very important. I'm dyslexic myself, so I think this is really important when you're learning a new language. Especially if the teacher writes in cursive. I have had history with teachers that have written in cursive in French, and I've always struggled with that. So we'll offer sentence frames or stems. We'll pair ELLs with supportive peers or, for oral tasks. We will use graphic organizers to scaffold paragraph writing, which I think is very important, and audio recordings of texts for students who require auditory support. Now, the modifications, so for students with IEPs or requiring modified expectations, so reduced vocabulary requirements. So for 3 to 4 family terms instead of a full list, or simplified sentence structure, lui è alto. Very simple. Oral versus written output where appropriate. and visual only matching tasks instead of writing, and then one paragraph or point in Venn diagram instead of several. So as long as I can see that they're trying, that's all that matters. And then the differentiated instruction, so for other ELL, etc. So visuals are printed support for the ELL or LD learners. The student may work in pairs or groups as needed. Sentence stems provided for oral dialogue. Teacher circulates to support pronunciation. So we're trying to do the pronunciation, but we don't have to be perfect at this point. Students may draw, write, or orally present based on their comfort level, which we're always pushing for students to get out there and push their boundaries. But depending on their comfort level, I'm not going to push them because that may create an anxious environment. Students may respond, as I said, in writing, orally, or drawing if needed. Teacher may scribe for students with writing accommodations, so I'm happy to do that. Draw and label option for students who need an alternate format, which I'm always okay with. Sentence stems and a list of common adjectives for struggling learners, so visuals and anchor charts for reference. Students may have sentence starters or adjective visuals available for students who need support. Sentence starters available for oral sharing. Reflections may be verbal or written. Students may work in pairs, simplified planner available, and sentence frames for support, and then providing key vocabulary on a board, allowing oral versus written responses, gloss versions of text for ELLs. So the assessment. So the assessment for learning I have from all of my lessons. I have put them here. So the 3 diagnostics that we have, the think, pair, share, and matching activity. Then the reading and vocabulary, highlighting students demonstrate ability to use strategies to understand new words. And then the final diagnostic where we will have a family photo brainstorm. The assessment of learning, we have the summatives. So the summatives, the final comparative paragraph, formally evaluated using a rubric for vocabulary, structure, clarity, and cultural insight. The summative self-assessment, so the checklist aligned for success criteria, helping students reflect on their own learning, which is very important. And then here I have the assessment as learning. So I have a whole bunch of formatives here that I have from my lessons. So the first formative is the oral pair dialogue. So teacher observes correct use of vocabulary and sentence structure. And then I have another formative, which is the exit ticket, where students write 1 to 2 sentences introducing family members used to check understanding and inform next steps. And then the next formative is the reading task and vocabulary chart. So it checks understanding of new adjectives and gender agreement, which is very important in Italian and as well in French, but we're not talking about that one. Then the next formative I have here is the written description and peer checklist. So assess students' ability to apply adjectives, agreement, and descriptive vocabulary challenges or succeeding trait of each group, environment, and why. Then the final formative I have here is the Venn diagram, which I mentioned before, and the draft paragraph, so teacher can check for accurate comparisons and grammar. And then the descriptive feedback. So I will provide verbal and written comments linked directly to the success criteria. So, for example, like great use of adjective agreement in mia sorella è simpatica. And then I will have peer feedback through checklist encourages collaborative environment, which I think is very important when learning a new language. And self-reflection prompts help students identify their strengths and their next steps. Alrighty, so they're required resources and learning environment for the unit. So visual aids such as family trees, adjective charts, and Venn diagrams. Audio files, so Italian dialogue about family. Technology will have the projector slash slides and the audio player, which can all be done on the smartboard now. Or they could do it through D2L or their Google Classroom. We might upload things on there. They're printed materials, so they're vocabulary sheets, graphic organizers, paragraph planners. This could either be printed or this could be online as well. And the classroom environment, so a collaborative seating for pairs slash groups, available materials for varied needs. Accessible materials for varied needs. So the inclusive design, so for equity, diversity, inclusivity, and the Indigenous perspective. So lessons value and explore diverse family structures and cultures. Students are encouraged to reflect on their own identity while learning about others. The materials and activities are accessible through visuals, sentence scaffolds, and multimodal outputs, written, oral, drawing. Peer collaboration fosters a respectful and inclusive community, and the connections to global perspective on family promotes intercultural understanding. So the overall reflection of the unit, I have not put that in there just because I have not taught this unit, and I'm not sure what to expect and what parts I might change. If I were to present this unit and we went through it as a class, I'd be able to fill this out no problem. So for the lesson plans, this is the first one I have. So the Italian subject in Italian, the topic, and the grade level, grade 10. So a brief description, so what I want the learners to know and be able to do by the end of this lesson. So at the end of this lesson, learners will be able to recognize and use Italian vocabulary related to family members and practice introducing their own family in Italian using simple sentence structures. The big idea of the unit is to include the understanding that language is a tool for expressing personal identity and relationships, and that learning vocabulary in context help build meaningful communication skills. So students will explore how family relationships are expressed in Italian, helping them to make personal connections and drawing comparisons with their own culture and language. So this lesson is made authentic through the use of personalized content. Students are encouraged to talk about their real families using Italian vocabulary. The lesson includes visual aids like family trees, auditory input, listening to a dialogue, and oral rehearsal in pairs, which supports various learning styles and ensures all students are actively engaged in meaningful real-world communication tasks. This lesson introduces possessive adjectives such as mia and mio in the context of family, helping students correctly identify and describe their relationship using gender-appropriate possessives. So mia madre, mio padre, and so on. So again, I have the instructional expectations. So the overall expectations being A1 and B1. The learning goal I have for this would be we are learning how to talk about our family members in Italian. We are learning how to use new vocabulary to describe relationships. Very simple. And then continuing, I have the specific expectations, which I read above, are A1.2 and B1.2. The success criteria I have are just 4 statements. I can name at least 5 family members in Italian. I can pronounce Italian family vocabulary clearly and accurately. We don't have to focus as much on that one. As long as they're trying, it does not have to be perfect. I can introduce someone in my family using a full Italian sentence. Questo è mio padre, si chiama Marco. I can understand and respond to simple questions about family. Chi è tua madre? Moving on, section 3. So the 3-part lesson that I have for this. So the activity, the mind's on the activation. It's about 10 minutes. So the purpose is to activate background knowledge, introduce the topic, and build curiosity. Curiosity is super important. So for the activity, I will project an image of an Italian family tree on the board with names labeled. First, I'll probably hide them, and then I'll ask them to see if we can come up with possible names, and then we can show them the names. And then I will ask them, like, what words do you recognize? The students share their observations of cognates and similarities to English or French or other languages that they may have, as connections are really important. And then I will introduce the learning goals and success criteria. And then the students will complete a matching activity, matching Italian family words to English words or images, either digital or paper-based, depending on the student's needs. So the instructional strategies, it's going to be a think, pair, share, visual aids, and guided questioning. Materials that they're going to have are the family tree image, printed or online, and the Padlet matching worksheet. Then I have the differentiation, which is the visuals and printed supports for the ELLs and the LD learners. Students may work in pairs or groups as needed. The action part of the 3-part lesson, where the work phase is about 35 minutes. So the purpose is to teach new context, provide practice with support, model pronunciation, and sentence structures. So what I would do is present family vocabulary via slides or whiteboard or vocabulary sheet, model pronunciation of each family member term and rehearse it with the class. So I would say it and then they would repeat it. And then the teacher, myself, I would introduce simple sentence structures. This they would also have on their vocabulary sheet as a point of reference. So just like the mio padre one, questa è mia sorella, si chiama Maria. So the students, what they would do is they would complete a listening activity, a short recorded audio of an Italian teen introducing their family. Students fill out a short response sheet identifying which family members are mentioned. Then they will create a mini family tree drawing their family tree and labeling about 3 to 4 members in Italian. It doesn't have to be immediate family. We can also stretch out to grandparents and cousins if they're very small family. In pairs, students practice a rehearsed oral dialogue. So, chi è lui? Who is he? Lui è mio fratello. He is my brother. And so on. Then I have the instructional strategies down here, the direct instruction, guided oral practice, listening comprehension. The materials that they'll have are the audio clip or teacher-read dialogue, depending on if technology is a factor today. The family tree template, either paper or digital. And differentiation, we would have sentence stems provided for oral dialogue, teacher circulates to support pronunciation, and students may draw, write, or orally present based on their comfort level. Finally, the consolidation. This is about 15 minutes long. For the purpose of this is to check understanding, reflect on learning, apply knowledge independently. The activity. So students complete an exit ticket. So they will be able to, or they will have to, and should be able to, write 2 full sentences introducing a family member. They can use the ones that we have from the vocabulary sheet as reference. So an example would be questa è mia madre, si chiama Lucia. They would include 1 drawing or photo of a person labeled in Italian. So they could draw if they're doing something and submitting it to the teacher on paper, or they would be able to upload a photo if they feel comfortable labeled in Italian. Optional, a few volunteers can share aloud. So we're going to try and push the comfort level. And the teacher reviews learning goals and has students do a quick self-check against success criteria. So a thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down. The instructional strategies, so written reflections, peer and teacher feedback, they're going to be right away if they choose to volunteer and share aloud. So for the materials, the exit ticket form, the visual support for sentence starters. The differentiation, students may respond in writing, orally, or by drawing if needed. Teacher may scribe for students with writing accommodations if they choose to do that option. And then this is just the assessment section, which I have gone over in the previous section. This is just the expanded form, the diagnostic, the think, pair, shares activity, the formative, the oral practice and listening activity for this lesson. And then the final formative for this one is the exit ticket that I have students do. For this one, there is no summative, just because it's one of the beginning lessons. The next lesson that I have here is the adjectives use in family descriptions. So the brief description of the lesson. So by the end of this lesson, learners will be able to describe physical and personality traits of family members using Italian adjectives and correct adjective-noun agreement. The big idea of this unit emphasize that language allows us to express identity and describe those close to us, and that grammatical accuracy plays an important role in clarity and communication. Students will learn how to use adjectives meaningfully and make gender and number agreement when referring to people, which is very important, as I said, in Italian and as well in French. The lesson is authentic as it invites students to describe real people in their own lives through reading comprehension, oral rehearsal, and written tasks. Students may apply vocabulary to personnel, meaningful, contextual, reinforcing new student, reinforcing new structures in a relevant way. Students engage through a variety of modalities, visual, oral, and written, ensuring diverse learning styles are supported. Student learners and, oh my goodness, I apologize. My dyslexia is acting up. Students learn and apply the rules of adjective-noun agreement in Italian, practicing how adjectives change based on gender and number to accurately describe family members. So the example I have here is mia sorella è simpatica, I miei fratelli sono sportivi. So for the overall expectations, strand B, B1, strand C, C1. The learning goals I have are just 2. So we are learning how to describe our family members in Italian. We are learning to make adjectives agree with the gender and number of the noun. Specific expectations, B1.2 and C1.4. The success criteria, I have 4 statements. I can use at least 3 adjectives to describe someone in my family. I can make my adjectives agree correctly with the noun. I can understand descriptions in a short reading passage. I can write and say full sentences using appropriate vocabulary and grammar. The 3-part lesson I have here is the expanded form of the one I have given you above, which is the Minds On, which is about 10 minutes. So for the activity, we're going to show 2 images of fictional families or real Italian families to show the example of Italian families versus Canadian families. And we're going to ask, come sono queste persone? So the brainstorm descriptive words. So we're going to see if they're big, they're small, they're full of different people, the people all look the same. Students suggest English adjectives they could describe the images with. And then the teacher introduces 5 to 7 Italian adjectives, so alto, simpatico, sportivo, and so on, and records them on the board. Or I'll have them already written on a vocabulary sheet, depending on student needs. So the instructional strategy, so brainstorming and visual prompting. The materials are family photo slides or printed images, and the differentiation is sentence starters or adjectives, visuals available for students who need support. The action is going to take about 35 minutes, and I will provide a mini lesson on adjective-noun agreement, highlighting how adjectives change for masculine and feminine and singular and plural nouns. Pardon me. I will project and read aloud a simple paragraph describing a fictional family, and then I will guide the class through a model analysis of the paragraph, highlighting the adjectives and underlining the nouns they describe. The students will read a simple paragraph and complete the vocabulary chart, identifying new adjectives, English translations, and their masculine and feminine nouns so that they're able to see this and refer back to this if they have to write a sentence. In pairs, orally describe one person in their family using 2 to 3 adjectives. And then the optional extension is a walk and talk. So students rotate around the room and describe one family member in 2 to 3 classmates. So if they feel really passionate about their sister that day or their brother, they can go around and tell the whole class about them. The instructional strategy, so direct instruction, peer speaking, and vocabulary practice. The materials are simple reading of a paragraph, sample reading paragraph, the adjective chart worksheet, and the differentiation would be the structure stems, for the sentence structure stems, and a list of common adjectives for struggling learners, the visual and anchor charts for reference. Finally, the consolidation is about 15 minutes, so a bit longer than the last one, I believe. I think the last one I had was 10 minutes. I could be wrong. Let me double check so I'm not going crazy. Nope, same length. My apologies. I believe all of them that I have here are about 15 minutes. The activity would be students complete a guided writing activity, writing about 3 to 4 complete Italian sentences. They don't have to be perfect, describing a family member using at least 2 adjectives that they've learned today. Students exchange work with a partner or peer for editing, using a checklist to ensure that the adjective agreement is correct, the sentences are complete and make sense, and at least 2 adjectives are used. So students self-reflect using a thumbs up or thumbs sideways or thumbs down, check in based on today's success criteria. So the instructional strategy, independent writing, peer feedback, and self-reflection. Materials, sentence template worksheet, peer editing checklist, and differentiation is draw and label options for students who need an alternate format. And then section 5, the assessment. I have the diagnostic, the formative, and another formative. I do not have a summative for this one as well. The final lesson I have here is the cultural comparison, Italian and Canadian families. Alrighty. And this is it. I'm going to go over it really quickly. So, the brief description of this lesson. By the end of this lesson, learners will be able to write a short comparative paragraph between their own family and a typical Italian family. They will draw on vocabulary, sentence structures, and cultural understanding developed in previous lessons. The big ideas emphasize that language reflects cultural values, and through comparisons, students can better understand their own identity and the cultural lens of others. So this lesson is authentic because it asks students to reflect on their real family life and compare it to research aspects of Italian culture. It incorporates listening, reading, discussion, and writing so that learners engage in multiple modes of expression. Students will use visual aids and peer collaboration to build confidence before working independently. This lesson focuses on using comparative words such as ma, which means but, anche, also, and invece, instead, to support students in writing comparative paragraphs that connect cultural insights with grammatical accuracy, which is very important for their future in the Italian courses. So section 2, the instructional expectations. So the overall expectations I have for this one are C1 and D1 under strand C and D. The learning goal that I have 3 for this one. So we are learning how to read and understand text about Italian family life. We are learning how to write a short paragraph comparing 2 cultures. and we are learning how to choose words and structures to fit a specific audience and purpose. Specific expectations, I have C1.4 and D1.1. So the success criteria, again, I have 4 statements. I can find and understand new words in a reading about Italian family culture. I can write a paragraph using Italian vocabulary that compares my family to a typical Italian family. I can organize my ideas clearly and use words like anche, ma, invece to show comparisons. I can explain who I am writing for and why. The 3-part lesson I have here, a 10-minute minds-on activity where students read a short, simplified Italian paragraph describing a typical Italian family tradition, like La Domenica. Teacher reads the passage out loud and pauses to check for understanding. We need to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And students work in pairs to highlight or underline any unfamiliar words, then use context cues, cognates, or a mini glossary to determine meaning, because we have our vocabulary foundational base from the previous lessons. So group discussion, cosa fa questa famiglia? So what is this family doing? Instructional strategies, we have shared reading, partner work, and vocabulary inference. The materials would be a printed paragraph or an online paragraph, depending on if they want to use technology, a mini glossary, and highlighters. Differentiation, so providing key vocabulary on the board allows, and I will also allow oral versus written responses and glossed version of the text for ELLs. And the action takes about 35 minutes. So the purpose is, like the previous actions, to determine comprehension and guide students in producing a culturally aware written comparison. The teacher does. So I will introduce and review comparison sentence starters. So anche, ma, invece, mentre. I will provide a paragraph planning template with a word bank, sentence stems, and examples for comparative structures. And then the students will complete a Venn diagram comparing their family to the one in the reading. 2 points per side, and 2 shared points. So 2 points on either side of the Venn diagram, and then 2 points in that middle shared part. Using the Venn and sentence starters, students write about 6 to 8 sentence paragraph in Italian. We can always shorten this depending on student needs, comfort levels, and I can see how well the class is doing. And they're going to be comparing the two families, focusing on purpose, so sharing information about family life, and the audience, a pen pal in Italy. I have a whole bunch of Italian family members, so I can always send this over to them, and they can have little pen pals because they're retired. So instructional strategies, so the graphic organizer, guided writing, and modeling, which is really important. Materials, Venn diagram template, sentence starter sheet, and paragraph planner. Differentiation, students may work in pairs, simplified planner available, and sentence frames for support. Finally, the consolidation, so their 15-minute closing, part of the lessons, so the activity, so students complete a self-assessment checklist based on the success criteria. Did I include at least one similarity and one difference? Did I use comparative words such as ma, invece, and anche? Did I write clearly for a pen pal to understand? It's not just you understanding, it has to be other people need to understand your work. Optional, so volunteers can read their paragraphs aloud to partners or to the whole class, depending on comfort level, and the teacher will lead in a closing reflection. So, perché è importante conoscere le famiglie di un'altra cultura? Why is it important to know about the families of another culture? So, instructional strategies, so the self-assessment, the peer sharing, and the reflective discussion. The materials, success criteria checklist, self-reflection ice ticket, and the differentiation, so sentence starters available for oral sharing, and reflections may be verbal or written. And again, down here, I have the diagnostic for the before learning. The formative, I have a formative assessment here. And this one, I do have the summative, as it is the concluding lesson of the mini unit. So yeah, this has been my mini lesson, and I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that I did well, and please let me know if there's anything that I can change to be more accommodating to the students, or anything in any areas that you can see that I can improve on. But thank you very much. I apologize for the length. Have a great day. Bye.